everyone, I'm back in my sewing room in my little haven. This is just a short video really, and it's really about just sharing some of my practice and some of the projects that I've been doing over the last few years. And I think a couple of years ago I did a course called Reclaimed Landscape, and it was really about landscape art, textile art, mixed media art. But the premise was, can we change things up? Can we do things slightly differently so that we're treading a little bit more lightly on the planet? You may or may not know that I'm an environmental artist and I'm very passionate about sustainable practice. So a group have got together and we spent really a good few weeks creating something, and it was just a lovely shared journey. So I'm going to show you my workbook. I wouldn't call it a sketchbook, it's more of a workbook, as we went through the classes together. And the digital workbooks are now available in my Etsy shop should anyone be interested in doing the actual course. But I thought you might be interested in seeing the workbook and then the finished piece. So I'll pop the camera around and you can see what you think. I'm laughing because it says sketchbook on the front. Obviously I intended it as a sketchbook and it became something else. But let me start with what it's actually made from. So it's actually just made from old packaging. So it's old paper bags that I've used. If I show you the inside, you'll see it better. I probably got them for a market, a craft market, and don't do those anymore and didn't want to waste it. So even what it's made out of, it set the tone really for the course. And this little bit here, this strip here, is the packaging on an Amazon parcel. So so that's it. And the kind of colour wash on the front was walnut ink. So again, homemade ink, not a commercial ink. So we started from the same place, which was to create a sketch in the field to capture our landscape. A very, very quick sketch, just some of the detail to take back into the studio to work, or our art table or our kitchen table, wherever we were. And this was working with commercial products. So this was just a tiny little watercolour sketch that I did in the field. And then we all had a similar starting point. So the first thing was to switch that up and to create more of a mixed media piece, and to try and introduce some new materials and to swap out some of the commercial materials. So I've got inks here, I've got chamomile, I've got some coffee inks, I've got some hand dyed fabric that I've done, and I've got a lot of waste paper that would have ended up in the bin. I don't take books apart, I should say. I get given books from the charity shop that have got missing pages and therefore can't be sold. So I've always got a few broken books about the place. And that was just a step to start us thinking. And then we got into the course, and I asked everyone to have a little look at their colour palette and to create a colour palette, which is essentially what everybody managed to do. And again, we started with commercial. So this was just watercolour, but some of these are already hand dyed. I've already started to introduce some other things, waste materials. But if I just move you on a couple of pages, I'll come back. This was then swapped up for a colour palette using botanical inks and plant dyes. So, and we all had a little go at certain things, and some of us were further down the line than others, but we all had a little go, because if we couldn't do anything else, we could dye using tea. I think a lot of us had a go at nettle ink that year. Got that lovely green. I love that yellowy green. This one was amazing. This was dried dried rose hips. I've done fresh rose hips before, but this was dried. And I know it's inside a book, and so it's not exposed to light, but it's held its colour absolutely brilliantly. So that was the first thing we did. We looked at how we were getting colour into our work. Then we looked at texture. So we looked at making texture with different things. This page was really about our waste. We hit our recycle bins and we looked to make stamps out of old polystyrene that we found in there. We printed with bubble wrap. We printed with jute spring inner, you know, the bit that comes in the middle. That's very textured. And we had a look at coffee, and we looked at coffee and how that behaved on watercolour paper. So we started looking at different things. And then we went back to our colours. and we started plotting them into our landscape. I mean, I cannot believe how dark that logwood botanical ink is, but it's not very light fast. So if that had been out, well, you'll see in the final piece, if that had been out, it would lose a lot of that colour over time. But in a book like this, of course, it's held it beautifully. And then we went on to the main body of the project, which again is in the digital download if you want to have a go at it, which is making little landscapes. I always maintain if you can do something small, you can scale it up, but the artistry is in the small. So we were using the materials we'd experimented with. We started making different landscapes. And you'll notice we wrote down what we were doing. So, and how we were exchanging. So it's a process of exchanging. If you want to be a more sustainable artist, you exchange the more commercial things for the things that you're making, which are more sensitive with the planet. So that was what we'd done here. I had used these to make little stitches. This is the end of bookbinding thread. I'm a bit wasteful because I should measure my bookbinding as a note to myself, because I've always got these little bits left over, but I just use them as little stitches. And then we carried on, and we looked at it with different lights. This is a braille release paper. If you do printing, you know that you release a lot of the excess onto paper, so you don't want it on your pristine prints. But then that waste paper gets used, and you can see I'm getting smaller and smaller with my detail and building up my layers, and that logwood is beginning to feature quite heavily. I got very into the coffee debate, and I started playing around with coffee using salt diffusion, which is why you've got these little marks, different dry lines, applying the coffee with different implements. And then some way through the course, it must have been this time last year, because 2 years ago, because I made hawthorn ink, and I just love that for the kind of hillside look, especially when it gets very dry in the summer, which doesn't happen that often here. But that was hawthorn, and it's about to blossom, so I just must remember that. And then we did little stitcheries and just started combining some of our fabrics and our fibres and seeing how they all fitted together. And again, we made notes, and this was dyed with madder, which became an important colour in my work. And another one, changing the light, changing the season, changing the time of day, and just experimenting, continually experimenting. This one, for example, is made from, that's your Amazon box there, right there probably, or some kind of packaging box. They're chunky, great for a substrate for working on, and twigs from the garden with lots of textual detail, and even moss stitched in. So sorry, stuck in. So even that had a purpose. And I had gone really down the coffee ink rabbit hole and created a very abstract interpretation of what, if you compare that to my first sketch, it's like, it just doesn't, you can't see it, but it's the way that my brain was working as I was exploring and experimenting. And I never quite got past this. The finished piece is quite close to this. Some of the detail is missing there, but the style of it is very much from here. So we're getting towards the end of the course now, and I asked everyone as they were making their final piece up to write a little story. What was your piece about? What were you trying to say with your piece? And then you've got that going forward, and you can see what you think later, and it's joyful to read back. So I hope you like the final piece, and as I say, if you're interested in doing the course, it's now uploaded into my Etsy shop as 2 digital books, 1 listing, but 2 digital books, and you can have a wee go yourself and see how you get on. So this is my final piece, and you'll see references from the sketchbook / workbook. You'll see the madder and the stamp and the hand dyed, plant dyed, and some of my little threads, some little stitching on. I went for a layered look, so I'm building up the layers of my understanding of a landscape that I'm very familiar with. And as you can see, the logwood has started to fade, but I really like that. I think that's really important for this piece.